Ankelium Down, written by Nik Hein, narrated with the help of the AI.
Chapter 5. Maybe that tired, hungover clerk in the Department of Fortune, the one responsible for Dam's luck, finally woke up at the very last moment, shook his head to clear the pounding hangover, and, wincing, decided to lend his charge a hand one more time. Not only did Dams manage to reach the far corner of the deck without a scratch, not only did he find a door exactly where he needed one. The door was actually unlocked. The aliens' weapons were cutting down slaves one after another, shredding and melting the empty pods. But Dams only felt the deadly heat of a shot whizzing past him a couple of times. At one moment, he risked a glance over his shoulder and saw that only one alien was firing at him, frozen in a pose no human body could ever imitate. The second alien was slumped against a bulkhead, sitting on the floor, head slowly drifting from side to side, making no effort to grab the weapon lying within arm's reach. It surely helped that between Dams and the aliens was not only the crowd of slaves, but also a few hundred pods. So Dams probably only appeared in the alien sights for a second or two at a time through the gaps. Still, it was insane how lucky he was. That's what he thought, anyway, as he finally reached the door, still not entirely sure how he was going to open it. On a galley ship like this, every door, every hatch was secured with a bio-lock keyed only to crew members. But then again, the prison block door had been open. Maybe this one will be. He didn't have time to finish the thought. The moment he grabbed the door's locking handle, the massive panel suddenly gave way without any effort on his part, and Dams practically tumbled into a narrow, dimly lit corridor, unable to break the momentum of his desperate charge. He scrambled to his feet just in time to see the man who had slammed the door shut and bolted it with a loud clatter turn to face him. And Dams saw what he was holding in his right hand. 6 months in the Camp Gratitude don't just fade away. Despite all the adrenaline surging through his veins, Dams froze on the spot. His eyes locked on the elongated grip dotted with several buttons. A neural whip. Turns out, it's not just combat reflexes that get burned into your flesh and blood. How many of them are there? The man with the neural whip asked. Tall, almost half a head taller than Dams, and solidly built, though not quite athletic. Close-cropped hair, a face marked by a couple of carefully treated but still visible scars, pale skin hinting at European refugee descent, and the uniform of an internal security officer. A senior warden. Didn't count, Dams replied. At least a couple hundred. The man's eyes narrowed for a split second, but he quickly shook his head. Not the fuel, the aliens. How many? The word fuel, used to refer to the slaves, hit Dams like a slap. He wasn't the sentimental type. He understood there was nothing human left in most of those who filled the pods in the engine section. He'd heard the term before. It was common among all the galley crews. But still, the cold word left a bitter aftertaste. Seemed like life in Camp Gratitude, and talks with Anton, hadn't left him untouched after all. But ignoring a question from a man with a neural whip wasn't an option. 2, Dams said. There was definitely a flicker of respect in the warden's eyes. You managed to get away from 2 of them? Impressive. Dams shrugged. It was a total mess. Pure chaos. The slaves crawled out of all the pods and charged at me. The man nodded. That's their typical tactic. They try to avoid fighting directly when they can. Instead, they pit their enemies against each other. For a moment, Dams stared at him in confusion, then realization hit. So it was them who woke the slaves. The aliens. But how did they make them attack? He cut himself off, remembering the constant mental pressure back at the engine deck. Oh shit. The man with the neural whip nodded again. Yeah, That's exactly how they captured the ship. He gave a crooked grin. For the most part, our lads just gunned each other down. He glanced at Dams. You from the Gratitude? Active? I am, Dams said shortly. He didn't feel like going into details. Not that it mattered. Was your mind hit? Dams remembered the psychic battering ram that had slammed into him. Now everything started to make sense. Yeah, that's probably why I made it out. My counterstrike must have taken one of them down. So they can do it too? Like the Emperor's bloodkin? Where the hell did they even come from? Who are they? The man nodded sharply. They can. As for the rest, I don't know much, but I'd rather explain it farther from here. He nodded toward the sealed hatch. That won't hold them for long. We need to get out of here ASAP. He pointed with the neural whip down the corridor, which curved to the left after a few dozen steps. What's down there? Dams asked. A safer place, the warden replied. At least I hope so. Their way through the winding maze of corridors and small compartments took about 10 minutes. They could have made it in 5, but they stopped at every door and every fire bulkhead, locking them tight behind them whenever possible. Manual locks, where they could find them. Dams helped the warden without asking questions, and not just because the man had a neural whip. The memory of how the aliens' weapons had torn the slaves to shreds was more than enough motivation. We're here, the warden said as they slammed shut yet another heavy-duty door, finding themselves in a relatively spacious room. We can catch a breath now, at least for a few minutes. Easy for you to say, Dams muttered, eyeing the heavily breathing warden. The man was a lot older than Dams had first thought. At least 20 years over the Dams himself, and there was a definite limp in his left leg. Honestly, during their frantic dash through the corridors, Dams had had at least 3 clear chances to jump the warden, knock him out cold, or at the very least grab the neural whip carelessly tucked into the warden's belt. But he hadn't done it. Old habits die hard. Dams knew how to prioritize threats, and right now, the danger posed by the 2 aliens, and if the warden was to be believed, there were a lot more of them on the galley, outweighed everything else. The warden shot Dams a questioning look. What do you mean? Dams nodded toward the whip. I've spent the last few months learning not to relax around anyone holding one of those. The warden pulled the neural whip from his belt, weighing it in his hand, studying Dams's face. His finger hovered over the regulator switch. Turn around, he finally said. And don't try anything stupid. I don't want complications. Not now. Dams obeyed. Maybe he should have taken the guy out back at the last hatch. A stray thought flashed through his mind. But it was too late for that now. A strong hand yanked down the collar of the prison jumpsuit. Dams knew exactly what the warden was looking for. A small tattoo at the base of the neck, right around the 7th vertebra. A barcode and a string of numbers. The passport and business card of every convict. Done, the warden said, letting Dams go. Hope that convinces you. Dams turned back toward him and found a neural whip aimed right at his face. His body tensed, bracing for another round of nightmare agony. And then, he noticed the warden's finger pressing the regulator button all the way into the device's housing. And nothing happened. Dams was more stunned than if the neural whip had actually fried his nervous system. He could see the red LED blinking clearly, a sign the whip was running at full power. But he didn't feel a damn thing. I've entered an exception for you into the system, the warden said, releasing the button. The indicator light went dark. Right now it only works with this toy, he nodded at his neural whip. But it'll broadcast the exception to any device that comes into range. Signal's weak, though. Won't even punch through a standard bulkhead. so you'd better keep this thing close just in case. And with that, he tossed the neural whip to Dams. Caught off guard, Dams almost dropped the device. His palms instantly broke out in a sweat as they touched the hated plastic, but he managed to keep his emotions in check. "Why are you doing this?" he asked the warden. "Where are we? What the hell is going on?" The warden suddenly slumped to the floor, leaned back against the bulkhead, and closed his eyes. Dams noticed large beads of sweat forming on the man's forehead. It could have been mistaken for a sudden fever, but Dams knew better. The warden's blood was finally running out of the adrenaline that had kept him going. "I want to live," the warden said calmly, without opening his eyes. "And with you as an ally, my odds just got a hell of a lot better, assuming we even have a chance. Though here, at least, it'll take them some time to reach us. As for your other questions, I wish I knew the answers myself." He yawned suddenly, and finally opened his eyes. "My name's Niels, and you are—" "Call me Dams." Niels gave him a quick, appraising look. "New Kinshasa? Planetary breach team?" He pointed to Dams's left shoulder. "Sorry, caught a glimpse of your tattoo while scanning the code. How the hell did you end up here? Of all people, the last thing I expected was to find a drop trooper among the poor bastards from the Venusian penal camps." Dams shrugged. There was no point in hiding anything now. Imperial Special Forces. As for Venus, well, during the ceremony, let's just say it accidentally came out that I'm an active rebel. Guess I was a latent one most of my life, but when they tried to, well, you get it. My mental defenses kicked in. Niels let out a low whistle. "Special ops, huh? Man, you really got the short end of the stick," Niels said with a crooked smile. "Or maybe the opposite. You actually got to taste some life. If they'd outed you like most kids around 16, your whole life would have been nothing but the mines. Or this," he added, jerking his head toward the direction they'd just come from. "If you can even call that living." Dams stayed silent, locking eyes with the warden. Niels sighed. "If you're looking for explanations, I don't have many," he said. "But the one thing that's certain is this: the galley's been taken." "By who?" "Those guys who tried to waste you at the engine deck," Niels said with a shrug. "But who or what they are, I got no damn clue. Far as I can tell, a few hours ago they docked with the galley, burned through the boarding breaches, and, well, you can figure out the rest." "Insurgents?" Dams asked, though even he didn't sound convinced. Niels shook his head. "You saw them, man. Non-human anatomy, non-human weapons, and abilities damn near on par with the Imperial bloodlines. If it weren't for that last part, maybe I'd buy that they were some kind of bots the insurgents cobbled together in a basement somewhere. Though even that'd be one hell of a stretch. But their psychic abilities..." His eyes suddenly hardened. "I watched my friends tear each other apart with their bare hands. That thing just stood there and watched, like it was enjoying the show. It didn't even fire a single shot. I saw a guard shot dead in the prison block," Dams said, "and slaves gunned down in the pens." "Maybe they were just too busy," Niels said. "How would I know? They're not exactly human." Dams suddenly caught something off in the warden's story. "You said you saw your friends." "Well, saw them getting controlled. But how did you survive? How come you didn't get caught up in it too? Were you watching through the surveillance feeds?" Niels was silent for a moment. "You weren't just a grunt, were you?" "Captain. Yeah, figures. Sharp." He sighed. "No. The aliens knocked out all the surveillance and comms across the whole galley almost immediately. I was in the next room over, saw everything through a cracked door. Then how?" "Mental commands and attacks don't really work on me," Niels said heavily, rolling up his right sleeve. At the crook of his elbow, Dams spotted a tattoo, almost identical to the ones worn by all the convicts. Against Niels's pale skin, it stood out even sharper. Except that Dams had never heard of anyone outside the prison camps having those tattoos, especially not on the arm. And then he remembered Anton's stories about the overseers at the penal colonies. "You're from one of the great imperial clans?" "In a way, yeah," Niels said, giving a sad smile. "But I'm not one of the Emperor's thieving sixth cousins or anything like that. This," he raised his tattooed arm, "I've had since birth, and I'm a passive. I can't issue commands, or fight back like you can. I can only resist." He paused, the weight of it hanging in the air. "But my life story's long and ugly, and not really worth getting into right now. We've got bigger problems to deal with, and we need a plan." "Such as?" Dams asked, though he was already starting to guess what the strange warden would say. "Such as taking back the galley from those bastards," Niels said harshly. "I get it. You're probably not feeling a whole lot of love for the Empire right now, or its prison system for that matter. But you've seen what they can do." Dams stayed silent, thinking. Two men, a former Special Forces officer turned convict, and an odd elderly warden with a shadowy past. Against them, mysterious, unknown beings wielding mental powers on par with the Emperor's own, and weapons far beyond human tech. Creatures who could intercept a galley traveling at high velocity through deep space and board it like it was standing still. Where did they come from? Who were they? Why? Lot of questions, no answers. And Dams knew the only way to get those answers was to take back the initiative. In the end, that was what he'd been trained to do his whole life. Before the penal camps anyway. To take the initiative away from the enemy. And he had no doubt. They were the enemy. But what was the Empire to him now? What was the Emperor? He couldn't forget for a second where he was. Sure, Niels had deactivated the neural whip and handed him the device. But who was to say the warden hadn't left himself a back door? Some hidden command that could turn Dams into a quivering pile of agony whenever he wanted. How could he trust anyone from a system that called people fuel and built its empire on absolute obedience, obedience so total it stripped away what made you human? For a moment, Dams could almost feel Anton standing behind him. He even turned, half expecting to catch a glimpse of that sharp, piercing stare. The stare of a skinny kid who, despite his boyish looks, carried a mind and soul far older and wiser than Dams ever would. But Anton just smiled, saying nothing. In the end, what did Dams have to lose by agreeing to Niels's offer? Right now, survival was all that mattered. Everything else could wait. Niels clearly knew his way around the tangled guts of the galley, and that alone seriously boosted their odds. "All right," Dams said. "I'm in. First off, where the hell are we? And what is this ship anyway? While I was rotting away in my cell, I didn't really think about it, but now I'm realizing there's way too much space for a regular prison galley." Niels smirked. "Smart guy. You're right. Standard prison galleys are way smaller. But the Fleet Resource Administration's run by penny pinchers. No point scrapping a perfectly good ship just because its first job's done. This used to be a transport, hauling settlers out to the outer colonies. Bigger the crowd you could pack in, the better the profits. Then the settler rush dried up, and they refitted her for current needs. Plus a few other minor modifications," he added with a dry chuckle. "That probably saved our asses too. Back in the day, everything was way more neat and tidy. But over the last 30 years, they kept making changes, patching things up without any real plan. Parts of this place turned into a goddamn maze." Just like the Ankelium mines, Dams thought. For all the Empire's obsession with order, sometimes there was no choice but to follow the vein wherever it led. And this spot where we are now, what is it? He asked. Used to be a backup comm center, Neil said. This galley was built during the old Alliance rebellions, so they buried it deep inside the hull and reinforced it like hell. In theory, it was supposed to serve as control center if the main bridge got taken out. During the refits, they figured ripping it out would have cost too much, so they just left it. Best part? Unlike all the other doors we've passed, this one can only be opened from our side. Plus, he added, even though those creatures are starting to find their way around the ship, it'll still take them some time to reach this place. Dams looked around. Indeed, the walls and even the floor of the compartment were riddled with openings, sealed off with plastic and metal covers. Light and power lines, data cables, all of it had once converged here. Right now, we've got two priorities, Dams said. First, we need intel on the enemy. Before we make a move, we have to at least get a rough idea of their numbers, their capabilities, and their position. You said this used to be a backup communications center, and they were too lazy to rip it out. What about the actual comm systems? He walked over to a wall and tapped one of the covers with his knuckles. Any chance some of it still works? Neil shook his head. I don't know. I'm not a damn ship tech, but it's a hell of a good idea, he said with a grin. Best shot we've got right now. We'll have to check it out. And you mentioned a second priority? Dams glanced down at the neural whip still in his hand. This thing's effective, sure, but something tells me those creatures don't have control chips implanted. We're gonna need real weapons. There's no way a ship this size doesn't have an armory somewhere. Oh, there's weapons all right, Neil said, rubbing his forehead thoughtfully. But most of the armories and security stations are probably in territory the aliens already control. What if we can't reach them? What's the plan then? Then we take the weapons off the ones who do have them, Dams said coldly, whoever they are. Looks like I got lucky with you, Neil said with a chuckle. First bit of luck I've had since I managed to slip away from the aliens during first contact. Is that why you let me out of my cell? Dams asked. Like some kind of test? Make it through the engine section, you're worth the trouble. If you don't, well, no big loss? The warden stared at him, genuinely shocked. What the hell are you talking about? I didn't release anyone. You need access to the central control panel for the prison block to open cells, and that's on the other side of the galley. Even the guards in the block can't pop a door without authorization from the main panel. I was just running down the corridor past the engine deck, heard some noise, and decided to check it out. His eyes suddenly narrowed. Wait, you're an active. You were supposed to be in solitary. I was in solitary, Dams said, confused. Then the door just opened. I figured it was some kind of system glitch or something. Any real glitch would have locked everything down tight, Neil said grimly. Someone let you out. And from the look of it, only you. You didn't see any other prisoners loose, right? No, but who would do that? And why? Neil stared thoughtfully at the heavy door separating them from the ship captured by aliens. Wish I knew, he said quietly. God, I wish I knew.